Okay, I think we'll get started today. I'm Megan Kumatek, Director of Leadership and Awards. I have been managing our webinars this year. So we're so excited for today's webinar, which is in conjunction with some focus on CTSOs in our Techniques magazine this month. So I've been working with Leah Milgram from our staff to work to promote all our wonderful CTSOs. So with that, I have a few housekeeping slides, and then I'll turn it over to our wonderful panel and panelists and moderator. So I am hitting next slide. Okay, so we just want to support all our CTSOs. We're so grateful for everyone, for everything, for anyone that I've forgotten. We're just, we recognize a variety of CTSOs through our work throughout the year, whether it's in the Techniques magazine, through events, webinars, all sorts of things. So we know that today's snippets of our CTSOs are not the only ones. So we just want to be sure to say that. Want to recognize our moderator's new book that Rachel is working on. Rachel, I don't know if you want to say anything. I probably should have mentioned that I was going to recognize this, but
oh, thank you for putting this up here. Yes, this was released last fall, and we have another one coming out this coming up fall that'll be geared towards our CTSO advisors.
Wonderful. Thanks, Rachel. And then I just want to touch on some upcoming webinars of ours. I believe the 29th is tomorrow. So we have one that is related to our CCD Counseling and Career Development Division. We have one on the Work-Based Learning Division. We have one on our Zello sponsored information. All of this information can be found on our website, and you can register on our website there as well. So we hope you'll consider joining on some of these upcoming webinars. And with that, I am going to, I forgot also mention that if you're a non-member of ACTs, we hope you'll consider fixing that and becoming a member of our organization. To do that, you can just go to this link or send me a private chat. Happy to put you in contact with our Director of Membership. But again, you don't have to be a member to join these webinars, but we hope you'll consider becoming a member of ACTs. Okay, so it's without further ado that I'm proud to introduce our panelists and our moderators today. So I'll be introducing our moderator, Rachel Mann, who is the VP of the New and Related Services Division and a former CTSO State Director and Advisor. She is the author of the CTSO Competition Companion and speaks at CTE events across the country. Thank you, Rachel, for leading and helping me develop this wonderful webinar. So I'll hand it off to you now.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you to both Megan and Leah for the great work that they've done in organizing this and putting this together. We try to make sure that each time we do a CTSO webinar that we're representing different CTSOs. And just a reminder too, if you're not familiar with which CTSOs are recognized at the national level, please be sure to look up the CTSO website at ctsos.org, and you're able to see the ones that are recognized. But with that, states also have the ability and the authority to recognize organizations that may not be listed there. For example, in Arizona, we recognize Ed Rising and Thespians, both as CTSOs. So there's a little variation in those. So if we aren't mentioning your CTSO, know that we're trying to keep it very applicable to all the CTSOs, because there's so many great things that CTSOs have in common, and we can really learn from each other as we're looking what each organization is doing. And with that, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Lennon Audrain. I've had the pleasure of knowing Lennon for many years. He is an educational policy PhD student at Arizona State University, where he studies high school grow your own programs. He is a former Latin and Spanish teacher and the former national president of Educators Rising, which is a CTSO for future educators. Next up, we have Paige Knowles, who I had the pleasure of meeting just last month at a conference in Pennsylvania. She's a first-year community college student studying in a construction management program. She spent 4 years in high school doing CTE work in a plumbing and heating program and is a state Skills USA champion. Although a student, she keeps busy by constantly posting content to show her advocacy for the skilled trades, and she's adamant about getting the youth interested in the construction industry, which she proves through her published book, Plumber Paige, Let's Replace a Shower Head, which I have on the bookshelf behind me. And then we have Brent Kindred, who is currently working as the vice president at the Wisconsin Automobile and Truck Dealership Association. He has spent the majority of his life in CTE. He is a former Skills USA local high school chapter officer, former Wisconsin Skills USA state director, and he served on the Skills USA National Board of Directors and is a former past chairman of the board. He is still actively involved in CTSOs, and next week his organization will host the Wisconsin Skills USA Automotive State Championships and also assist with the collision and diesel competitions. So thank you so much to each of our panelists for being here today. I am so excited about the content that you'll be sharing, and just, whenever we're sharing information with others, we all get better together. So first of all, my first question is, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with your CTSO and how you got involved? And Brent, can you kick this one off for us?
Absolutely. First off, thank you to ACTE for hosting an important session like this. CTSOs can truly have such an impact on young people. And I would like to think that I am one of those young people that have been affected by CTSO. My journey began when I was a sophomore in high school many, many years ago. Two teachers, Mr. Rauscher and Mr. Bartman, were the two teachers that engaged me in our CTE courses and said, there's this organization that we think that it would be good for you to join. And I'm so glad that I went to that first meeting and decided to join Skills USA at that time. And it's through, it's through the mentorship of the teachers, through CTE courses, and certainly through the experiences that I was able to have being a part of Skills USA, who I think really, it really helped to set me on the trajectory of where I am today. Initially being a teacher, advisor, and then on to where I'm at today. So CTSOs and my teachers, which is an absolute key, played a vital role. And I think many other people who have, been in CTSOs might have a similar story.
All right, and if our other panelists would like to chime in, and before you do, I just want to mention for the folks that have joined us, thank you for being here, and please share out where you're from, what CTSO you're involved in, any resources that you have and questions that you have in the chat, and then also share out the responses that you have to the same questions that we are asking our panelists.
Sure, Rachel, I'll jump in here. I have my Educators Rising shirt on because I'm going down to the Educators Rising Arizona competitions today. And so the same as Brent, when I was a sophomore in high school, I got involved. And for those of you that don't know some of the networks, Rachel was the state director of Educators Rising Arizona, and I ended up being the state president. And so I've known Rachel since I was in high school. And so my experiences with CTSOs have been far and wide. Rachel and I have traveled the country together talking to different Educators Rising state chapters. And so my experiences with CTSOs have always been positive. We know we have a national teacher shortage. That is not a surprise to anyone who's on this call. And so Educators Rising is doing great work to ensure that we have a teaching profession that is highly skilled and highly qualified by starting teacher recruitment and teacher preparation in high school. And so I'm really excited to have been a product of Educators Rising, having been a teacher, and now working and studying the teacher shortage and studying Educators Rising programs across the country.
And I started in Skills USA my freshman year. I was in the plumbing and heating lab, and my teacher told me there's this competition-based CTSO that you should really get involved in. And then I started going to professional development conferences and other activities that were involved with Skills USA, and I just fell in love. I met so many great people, and it really has changed my life for the better. And yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And for those of you who are sharing in the chat, we have such a wide range of representation from across the country. So thank you so much. And we're really looking forward to your input as well, so that we can really learn from you and what you're doing. And the next question that I have is, why is it important for individuals to get involved in their CTSOs? And how can educators help encourage student involvement? And can we start off with you, Lennon, and then the other panelists can chime in?
Absolutely. Everyone is here on this call because they believe in the power of professional associations for their careers. Everyone who's hopefully on this call is an ACTE member, and if you're not, I'll plug what Megan plugged, which is to become one. But everyone knows that professions need their accompanying professional organizations so that you can socialize, so that you can develop professionally. And that's the same for CTSOs and high school students. And so one of the really cool things about CTSOs is that it takes things that we know are best practices from careers and once again scales them down. And so participation in the CTSO is important because it not only helps students to develop professionally as they're exploring whatever career it may be. For my case, it was education. You know, you go to an education conference, you learn some teaching strategies, you learn what's new in the research, but also it helps students to make connections with other people who are going to be their coworkers and professionals in the field later on in life. And those connections last through post-secondary training and education and into the field. And so I think it's really important. One of the ways that you can encourage student involvement, I think, is to make your CTSO front and center in your courses, to push for that, to show the various travel, the various competitions, the various events that you get to attend and opportunities that you have that, you know, of course, make the resume look good, but also help students to develop some of that intrinsic motivation that they need to be successful in their careers. And so I think one of the things that you can do is to just make sure that you have your banner, your chapter banner up, you have a lot of information available, and then you're constantly talking about it in class is just another part of your course, because CTE is an intercurricular facet to our CTE course. I'm sorry, CTSOs are an intercurricular facet to our CTE courses.
Lennon said that wonderfully. I don't know how I'm going to follow that. But I think it's really important to share the success stories of the students to the new students coming in, explaining to them what the benefits are, because they hear about it, but they don't really know why it's important. So just showing what can happen from getting involved is really important, I think. And yeah, I mean, Lennon really said it really well. It's just important that students get they're career ready after getting involved. So.
And I'll add 2 points, one for the student side and one for the educator side, is when we take a look at workforce development and certainly the development of new teachers, getting involved in CTSOs, whether it's FFA, HOSA, DECA, FBLA, Educators Rising, all are vitally important. One of the things that we do through all of our CTSOs is that we do some type of competition. And the way that I like to categorize that is that through the spirit of competition is that we are raising the game for all young people in your chosen area, whether it is marketing, whether it is business education, culinary arts, FCCLA, whatever your chosen CTSO is it's a way to engage young people and to show them that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that there is relevance and there is meaning. For the educators, as far as your recruitment and what is happening in your CTE classes, one of the things that I like to think makes us different than core subject matter, math, science, English, is our CTSOs. And if you do strip away CTSOs from CTE content, how are we that much different? We aren't. And so for the educators is, remember, it's not a conversation of if we should have CTSOs embedded into our CTE classroom and curriculum. It's why don't we have CTSOs embedded in? Because as far as educators, there really is no greater feather in your cap than when your CTSO students have success. And I can say success on so many different levels, but when your students excel in CTSO settings, whether that's in a local chapter setting, whether something at a district level, regional level, certainly at a state level, that is really a big feather in your cap, because it's a different organization. It's a different setting that is recognizing your students being good at what they do. Because ultimately what you're doing as an educator, as a program, as a school, is you're preparing your students to be proficient, to know what they should be able to do in that particular setting, whether it is being a teacher, whether it's something in agriculture, whether it's something in family care, whether it's something in culinary arts, business, marketing, all the above, is that it really sets us in CTE apart from the rest of the school.
That is so true. And each of you have such unique perspectives. I really appreciate you sharing. And again, for the folks in the chat, please share out your thoughts. And we have a great comment from Adrienne Graham. The level of energy you bring will be reciprocated by your students. That is so true, who choose to participate. I would typically consider my DECA minutes as showtime, and very well said to Brent. And Adrienne, you're so on point with that, because the students will never be more excited than you are as an advisor. And the showcasing piece, when you're sharing the stories and that word of mouth piece, that really is going to breed that excitement for others. All right, next up, how do CTSOs, okay, so first of all, the name of this webinar is Get Involved, CTSOs Promote Leadership and Communication Skills. So how do CTSOs promote those leadership and communication skills? And what activities do you recommend for using CTSOs to build these skills? And Brent, we're gonna jump right back in and have you talk again on this one.
Thank you. This really gets down to the grassroots level. And it really happens, the magic happens at the local level. Is all of our organizations have state offices and national, national offices and things of that nature. But truly the power of CTSOs happens at that local chapter level in your individual schools. And all of us that are probably on this call can relate to that. One of the things that helps develop the both leadership and the communication skills is through your local chapter setting, through business meetings, through officer elections, through activities, and things that are as, we think of them as simple and benign as maybe it's getting water or soda or donuts for a meeting or pizza for a meeting. Is that requires a young person to take on that responsibility. I know one of the things that really influenced me, and I didn't realize it at the time, and that's probably part of the delayed gratification in education, is when I was part of our local chapter officer team, we had to develop an agenda for that particular meeting. We had to coordinate speakers for that particular meeting. We had to come up with the treasury report to report back to our members. Everything that I cited there and more is leadership skills. We had to develop the communication as well. How do we communicate that to our members that are sitting there? How do we communicate around the school? How do we communicate with our other CTE courses that some of our local members might be in? Another piece with communication is that if you think about each one of our CTSOs, again, FCCLA, HOSA, DECA, Educators Rising, is every single one of our competitions, all aspects of our student organizations have communication and leadership built in. I'll give you a couple of examples of a CTSO that I know well, Skills USA, just because of my background. Is for those of you that have Skills USA in your schools, is that you're going to have some of your students that are going to be attending state conferences very, very soon, and they might compete in welding. Welding does have a leadership component. It might be something as simple as turning in a resume. That is still a leadership component that relates to them in the rest of their life. How about welding art sculpture? Yes, that welding art sculpture might be built and assembled back at their school to the specs that Skills USA requires. But one thing that they have to do on site in the competition is they actually have to give a presentation on the work that they did, why they did it in front of judges. And I could go on, whether it's an automotive competition, whether it's graphic communications, whether it's woodworking, carpentry, plumbing, the list runs on and on. That is a common theme that runs through all of our CTSOs, is that leadership and communication component. Is it puts students in real life situations and they have to rise to that bar in order to be successful. And that's a piece that I spoke about earlier, is that through the spirit of competition, we are raising the bar for all young people to reach higher and further than they ever have before.
Yeah, Rachel, to just add to what Brent said, because I think everything he said is true just about, the leadership that you do at the local chapter. There are also obviously, state chapters and the national chapters too that have multiple roles for and opportunities for leadership. Anything, one of the really cool things that I see when I study these Grow Your Own High School programs, which are CTE education and training programs, is that teachers will integrate competitions into coursework. And so that is one of the ways that CTSOs can start to build those leadership and those communication skills, is to explicitly make part of their coursework, engaging in competitions that are team-based, which require different members to distribute their expertise and to lead in different ways. But also just the communication aspect of CTSOs that I think is one of the most unique, is that high school students really are taking the charge and communicating with their chapters to figure out what they're doing. And some CTSOs have district level meetings and competitions, and they have the ability to coordinate and collaborate there. And so I think it's really interesting to think about all the different levels of leadership and communication that are available in CTSOs, starting with school districts all the way up to the national level, and seeking those out, making those explicit to your students. Taking students and pulling them aside and saying, hey, I think you'd be really good for this, are all ways that you can help to promote leadership and communication skills within your program.
Definitely what Lennon said. On top of the different levels that there are, other than the technical competitions, there are professional skilled competitions where you have to do public speaking. And that definitely will work on your leadership and communication skills, because nothing tests that more than standing in front of a panel of judges and just speaking. So that definitely challenges you. And even if you are working on the technical competitions, there's still the teamwork aspect on all the meetings. And even when you're fundraising, you have to talk to other people. So yeah.
Excellent. So, such great points. And I do want to mention that in the chat, Tristan Hayes says, years after graduating, my students remember the DECA conferences and travel trips most. The classroom learning led to participation, but the experiences are the moments that last forever. And that's fantastic. It's when I hear students use their CTSO and the name of their class interchangeably, you know that the classroom instructor and advisor is doing something right. That's fantastic to see. All right, and I do have to mention, Paige, well, both you and Lennon failed to mention that you've both been invited to do keynotes as a result of the skills that you've developed through your CTSOs. So for the folks who are tuning in, if you're ever looking for a young voice to speak at your events and conferences, be sure to reach out to these folks. It's exciting to see people at your age really sharing your voice that way. All right, and I think I lost my place. Give me one moment. Excuse me for that. I get excited and start scrolling without even realizing it. All right, so next we have describe a project or a moment during which you saw yourself or a student truly engage, where you or the student discovered relevance in their education and their own potential. Paige, can you start this one off for us?
Yeah. So I can speak on behalf of myself, and then I can speak on seeing other students doing it as well. So when I was in school, I competed first in extemporaneous speaking my sophomore year, and then junior year, I got to compete in the plumbing competition, which is what I was really adamant about. And just training to be able to know the stuff that I needed to know to do that, and being able to work in the real world to see how these things apply and to build walls and put together the plumbing inside and understand why things work. All of that learning and lessons that I had in school really applied when I went out into the real world or even the competition, and I had to make it work. It goes hand in hand. The lessons that you learn in school really are real world lessons that you're going to learn eventually anyway. And then also my sister competed in the plumbing competition this year, actually. So I had the opportunity to train her. And as I since I won second place in the state competition my junior year, there were really high levels of expectation for me to be able to train her well. And she did really well. She applied everything that I have taught her as well as in school. And she ended up getting second place at district level. And next year she'll definitely make it to states. And I'm really proud of her. And it's just really interesting to be able to see the levels of growth that everybody goes through just from simple lessons, or it seems simple to us.
I'll jump in. Paige said it really well through the competition lens. One of the moments that really struck me personally when I competed many years ago in welding was the fact that when I came out of the welding booth, it wasn't my teacher that was standing there. It wasn't somebody from my local community that was standing there. It was industry that was standing in front of me. And you have to kind of rewind the clock back to when you're, a sophomore or a junior, is in so many cases is that you've built that relationship, with your teacher. But in this instance, it was somebody that was from industry that was saying that, this was right, or this was wrong, or this, could use some improvement. And that's when it really struck me that that as important as the grades were to get in school, very, very important, is really the work that I was doing in that competition was being evaluated by industry. And I think that when you take a look at all of our CTSOs, again, whether it's FCCLA and it's baking and culinary, childcare, HOSA, DECA, FBLA, they all have this industry component for what students should know and be able to do in order to be successful in life after high school. And that was really a moment that really engaged me as a young person, because it allowed me to project further out and to really see that light at the end of the tunnel. And it wouldn't really matter what industry you're going into or what profession you want to go into, is industry is really that bar. So that was really the one that really gave me relevance and really helped me discover that was through that competition and being greeted, mentored, evaluated by industry.
Yeah, I'll end, I think, on this question by just saying that, like Paige, I think competitions are a great way. And like Brent was mentioning, industry loves coming to this because they are the future workforce. And so I think one of the interesting things about CTE education and training and Educators Rising is that it is grow your own, that these programs exist to feed back into your school or your school district. And so your industry partners are your superintendent, they're your principals, they're all of the directors of CTE and recruitment and hiring across the state, in various school districts. And so for me, I think what I saw was once I had graduated was people reaching back out and saying, oh, hey, would you like to come teach in my district? Or, oh, would you like to come teach here? And we see this in programs, in Educators Rising programs in Virginia. They have a really cool program where students who are in the top of their Teachers for Tomorrow program, which is their name for their CTE education and training program, get a contract at graduation that says in 4 years, we will have a teaching position for you. And what a powerful moment and motivator for students to continue, especially in a time where we know teacher prep enrollment is declining. Those are the things that I think, at least within the education field, that I have seen that are powerful moments that make things relevant, that make education and training programs in particular so powerful, is that we are bringing back students from the very communities that they grew up in to contribute into and back into those communities.
Excellent. We do have some folks sharing out in the chat. I really love the conversation over here. And Greg Zick has the question, did you have industry mentors help prep you for the competition, which goes along with several of you have talked about industry involvement, but how about with specifically having mentors? Have you seen that happening within competition prep? And anyone can jump in on that one.
I definitely have. So It's probably like this in a lot of schools, but within our school, the plumbing program specifically was very big, and there were a lot of industry professionals, business owners who were coming in asking, do you have people? We need more employees. So they were already reaching out. So when they saw me having the motivation and wanting to learn, everybody was trying to get me to come work for them, to try and mentor me and help me learn. So the mentorship was from everybody, even competitors were working together to try to build me and help me learn as much as I possibly could.
All right, excellent. And some other things being shared in the chat. We have someone talking about bringing industry partners to help students prep for FBLA. And business and industry, so many times they are looking to give back. So as advisors, if you have that moment of, oh, I don't want to bother them, I don't want to take away from the important work that they're doing, they want those meaningful experiences. Reach out to them. The worst that can happen is they say no. But even now, with everyone understanding the technology to bring people in virtually, that's a much lower ask, is to say, hey, can you even give some feedback on interview skills or on how they're on the preparation piece via a virtual call, through a Zoom call or whatever platform you're using. All right, and Lynn Basham, she mentions that TSA should be mentioned. My student won a competition in structural engineering that made others in the school notice what we were doing. And Lynn, I'm going to send you a link on one of our TSA advisors who were recently on the NCLA podcast, and they're doing some great things in that area as well. And let's see, other than competitions, what would you say are the major benefits of membership in a CTSO? Thank you for asking that, Greg, because that goes right along with our next question, which is, what are other benefits of CTSOs for students that have not been mentioned yet? And Paige, I'm going to have you start this one off again.
All right. Yeah. So I feel like a lot of it has been covered already. Like Rachel said, industry professionals are always willing to give back. So they're always trying to network with you at the competitions, conferences, and even after that, if they remember your name or have a contact information, they're always trying to help in any way that they possibly can. And otherwise, really, networking is the most important thing. And through that, so many opportunities and possibilities present themselves. Even after graduation, I'm still getting reached out to people that I've met through Skills USA. And even my peers and friends, I've made lifelong friends just from networking and talking and being open to interacting with other people from these conferences. And I've made lifelong friends. So I think that's a note that's worth noting, because there's a lot of more important things that come from it than just being able to compete and say you won first or second place.
Well said. I'm going to double down on some of the other things that have been said, but really maybe draw a little more attention to them. Is, through our CTSOs, and as I said earlier, it's really what makes CTE different and differentiates us from the core academics is that we are really honing in young people's personal and workplace skills. And we've heard teamwork, and we've heard mentorship, and we've heard about working with industry. But truly, through all of our CTSOs, is that we are trying to help young people to up their game and to be ready. What are the personal skills that we need to have to function in the workplace? What are the workplace skills that we need to have, again, to be successful for wherever we are after high school? And we do talk about the technical skills, but I think as many of us, realize that through reskilling and upskilling and how fast technology is changing, that if we can instill workplace and personal skills in young people, we as a society, as far as workforce development, will be so much further ahead. So again, that's really one of the prideful pieces that we have for our CTSOs, is really getting them ready with those workplace and personal skills.
Yeah, Brent, the last thing that I'll say on that, from the perspective of someone who works in education, is just the power of knowing others in your field. We know a lot of students, well, we know this from the most recent PDK poll in 2018, that parents are no longer suggesting teaching as a viable career for their children. And so at least from the Educators Rising perspective, I think it is so powerful to get 300, 400, and then to go to the national conference and have 1,000 high school, collegiate students who are all there passionate about the same career. And so one of the benefits, I think, is just knowing that there are other students who share the same interests as you. Paige mentioned friendships. My best friends are from Educators Rising, the time that I spent there. But also, and this was mentioned in the chat, the professional development. I think we get very, it's hard to think of high schoolers doing things that are leading them to their careers, because we kind of have this long runway where we, and traditionally have assumed that students might go to college, and that's not always the case. And we know CTE is there to be an alternative. And so the runway might actually be shorter for some students in CTE. And so we have to start being realistic about the things that we're doing and making sure that they're prepared for the workforce. And that's one of the great things about CTSOs, is that they bring in industry partners to help do that professional development, to help judge, to help prepare students for the workforce. And so it's a nice mesh between very professional associations and also just these student associations, in a great low stakes way for industry partners to get involved, and then for them to develop a more high stakes relationship through a formal partnership, through informal mentoring of students. And so I think CTSOs offer a lot of benefits because they are low stakes for industry partners and in some ways high stakes for students. And that's a beautiful balance, because it alleviates some of the pressure on industry to feel the need to be the one educating or the one doing all the professional socialization. Now they can just attach themselves to someone else. And so that's one of the beautiful things I think that CTSOs have across the country for various career fields.
Excellent. And for those of you who are tuning in to the on-demand version of this webinar, some of the great comments that are being shared by advisors in the chat are, in addition to Lennon pointed out, Elizabeth Garofalo's talk about the professional development. We have folks talking about the relationships that are built. Tristan Hayes says that CTSO membership allows like-minded students from different schools and multiple states to meet and discuss future ambitions. So true. And it allows students from different socioeconomic groups to find common ground and network. And Lennon had some more takeaways in here, which he was just now touching on. And Dawn Thompson mentions BPA, which we haven't really talked about today. They're doing some great work, but she says that they have a Torch Award program that allows every member the opportunity to earn different levels of Torch Awards. This is a neat program that many teachers in our area have implemented. It's co-curricular and allows for successful outcomes for every student beyond the competition. So this is great stuff so far. And the next question I have, because we're talking about what are the benefits for students, let's look at what the benefits are for advisors. Why should a new faculty member consider getting involved with the CTSO, other than, of course, it is a requirement with Perkins funding, but what are some benefits for our CTSO, or our CTE faculty? Lennon, can you start that one off for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general, teaching is an island. You go into your classroom, you shut your door, and you're lucky to collaborate with your colleagues maybe on your prep period, maybe at lunch, before or after school. And that's, if you're in an English department or a math department or world language. In CTE, you might almost be the only person in your school who is even teaching culinary. You might be the only person in your school teaching early childhood or welding. And so how do you engage professionally with other welding teachers? Sure, there might be your welding association, but what about the pedagogy of welding, which is something I've never thought about. But I think the considerations are just the same as students. There are professional development opportunities throughout the school year that often your CTSO director might offer. That really hit on how to teach about whatever career you are involved in. And so on the side of every, CTE is almost its own island, and then you might be your own smaller island. It's a great way for you to connect with other teachers who are teaching the same area as you, to understand how other teachers in other areas, even in the same state, are developing relationships with industry partners, how they are grappling with shortages, or how they are grappling with recruitment. And so by attending, of course, the competitions, you get to talk to other CTSO advisors. By engaging in the CTSOs, you get to go to professional development. And so I think it is about developing, in the same way, the connections that students make with each other, to have that support as they're going through their teacher preparation or through their welding preparation or culinary preparation, to have that same network of support when you're learning how to teach high school students or collegiate students, all of those things as well.
That's a really interesting perspective that I've never even thought of. And I was personally thinking, how am I going to answer this question? Because I've never been a teacher, but I know people who have gone through what I have gone through as a student, being a part of a CTSO, and they want to follow through and give back to that CTO in a sense, because they want to become a teacher and help other students have those same experiences, similar to Brent's story. So I feel like he'll be better at answering this kind of question. But yeah, that's a really interesting perspective, Lennon, that I didn't even think of.
And I probably answered a little bit of this a little bit earlier, and I'll repeat it and expand on it, is for any teacher, but certainly a CTE teacher, in order, when you invest yourself and you want your students to do well in your courses, your classes, is when they can have success, as I said before, at competitions, district, regional, state, national, and obviously for Skills USA, we've got the World Skills competition as well, is there is no higher honor. And when your students can come out of your program and place and go to the next level, it is validation for everything that you do in your classroom, educators. It's not the assistant principal that's saying you're doing a good job. It's not the principal that's saying you're doing a good job. It's industry that is saying you're doing a really, really good job on preparing your students for that next level. And that's an unbiased opinion, and it's a super high opinion. So from that standpoint, again, it's really great for our educators. But what does that do for educators? When your students are excited, when your students go that extra mile, when your students perform well and they get gold, silver, bronze, first, second, third, fifth, when they are the cream of the crop, what does that do? Educators, that invigorates you. That gets you excited. That puts gas in your tank and gets you to reach higher, to reach further, to get that professional development, to go to that class to be better, to learn that skill so you can bring it back to your classroom so that your students can benefit from that. In addition to helping you and invigorating you, it also pumps up your administration. It pumps up your school board, because if it's a feather in your cap, it's a feather in their cap, because they are your principal. That is your school board. And once you build that excitement, now your community also gets excited. That is through the power of CTSOs, what it can do for you educators personally, day in and day out, to make you better, for you to be recognized as being the best at what you do.
That is powerful stuff, Brent. Thank you. And I, as a former FCCLA advisor, I can say that my most rewarding moments as a culinary arts teacher were those FCCLA moments where students received scholarships, or when I just saw their excitement and their passion, or reading an essay where I had a student, it was his senior year, he had been with me since his freshman year, and in his senior essay, he talked about, for an FCCLA competition, he talked about how FCCLA had literally saved him from following his brother's footsteps of selling drugs, and just some experiences that I had no idea that was even part of his world. So the next question, and again, we have some great things happening in the chat over here. I don't want to miss anything. Dana shares that it increases student motivation and encourages student ownership of their own learning through competitive events, and their CTSO experiences and opportunities can be the best way to light the learning fire. So true. And we have, let's see, folks recognizing Brent, Lennon, everyone, all of our panelists for what they're doing. Thank you guys for that feedback. And I do want to mention for our next question, if this is something that you don't want to respond to as a panelist, that's fine. We did have another advisor who unfortunately couldn't join us last minute, had something come up. But what are questions that you had when you first started advising? And what tips do you have for new advisors? And Brent, I'll start with you.
Get involved. I know that as new or newer teachers, there's a lot on your plate. You're learning new school schedule. You're integrating yourself into a new school. You're learning kids. You're meeting with parents, your progress reports. I know there is an awful lot on your plate, but I'm here to tell you without a shadow of a doubt, one of the best things that you can do right from the get-go is to get involved, to learn as much as you can about your CTSO, whether it's TSA or PBA or FBLA, FCCLA, doesn't matter, is integrate yourself in, network with other CTSO advisors in your school, neighboring schools in your region, but get involved. It's one of the best things that you'll do. Do not wait. I know it's a busy time, but again, for anybody, whether you're new, whether you're a veteran teacher, CTSOs really have the ability, obviously to influence young people, create excitement. It's really something that I put at the top of the list.
I think the only advice, because I've never been a CTE advisor, just a teacher, would be to echo Brent, to get involved, but also to not be afraid to let your students help you along the way. You'll find, you have to think about your CTE student. Who is that person? It's a person who's sort of identified that what they want to do is what you're teaching them. They want to do something in the field of education or in welding. And so they already have some of that motivation that's been talked about in the chat through and through. And so I think don't be afraid to lean on your students as people and giving them some of the responsibilities. You don't have to plan all the meetings. You don't have to be the one to ensure that, all the nitty-gritty things that you need to make sure happen in between for planning for different events at your school, whether it's recruitment or other. Those don't all have to fall on you. So let and empower your students to do some of those things as well, because that's how they get involved and that's how they stay involved, is to when they have advisors who trust them, who empower them. And those are some of the best chapters that, as a state officer, that I saw, and whether it was here in Arizona or across the country, was those who empowered their students to take charge and ownership of some of the CTSO components.
And absolutely, it should be student-led, but we know the advisors hold the keys and have the direction for the CTSOs. And we have some advisors sharing some pieces right now in the thread. We have Adrienne talking about her time as a DECA advisor was so crucial to my trajectory. That network landed me new teaching opportunities, board positions, and even led to my participation in a national post-secondary CTE fellowship through the ECMC Foundation, which is fantastic. They're doing some great things there. It also helped me connect to ACTE and Virginia ACTE, where I advocated to create the current position I hold in my district. CTSO membership makes the possibilities endless, and it doesn't even have to stop when you advance to the next level. So true. Then we have Elizabeth Garofalo sharing, I always said that not only did FBLA make my students better citizens, it made me a better person as well. Love that. Tristan Hayes says, as a new advisor, if you can chaperone with an experienced advisor who is attending a leadership conference or competitive event, so you get to see the experience. It must be experienced to be truly understood. And I'll add to that, Tristan, that my first FCCLA conference that I went to by myself without students, because I just wanted to get a feel for it. And then was so excited to go back and take my students the following year and year after that. Don Thompson shares, we encourage our teachers in the alternative licensure program to volunteer to work at their CTSO conferences during the first year if they're not familiar with the organization. This allows them to learn more about the organization during that first year of teaching, as well as to meet other teachers in their area. That's a great way to get a mentor too as a new advisor. All right, great stuff. And up next we have, what tips do you have for competition readiness success? We know it's competition season right now. We have a whole nother webinar on this piece, but just since it's the right time of year, what are some tips that you have for competition readiness success?
Yeah, I can take this one, Rachel, to start. So my 3 competitions in Educators Rising were public speaking, impromptu speaking, and creative lecture. And so I was state champ for all 3 of them 2 years in a row, and then national champ for them, like between 2 years. So my experiences with public speaking or partially, and of course, this is not me. This has not come without amazing mentors. So Rachel coached me. Rachel's a speaker. She coached me through a lot of these. One of the things that I think for competition readiness is that I really enjoyed was presenting things to industry professionals to get feedback from them, at least with the speaking competitions. And so what I found really interesting was just the diversity of perspective and being ready for anything that could happen. And so one of the things that happened in my national competition is sound didn't work in one of my presentations. And you just had to go with the flow, and practicing that beforehand was really, really helpful. And so for competition readiness, I think it would be really helpful to put your students in front of industry partners, invite industry, and which is a great way also for industry partners to know and to understand what it's like and what you all are doing before you ask them to come and, come down and judge at a conference. Come to our high school, judge these competitions where we have students who are participating and practicing for these bigger state competitions. It's a great way for you as an advisor to develop connections to the industry partners near you. And so that's what I would say, is to practice in front of industry partners, get their feedback, be prepared for anything. So yeah, thanks, Rachel.
And from the student perspective, it's always just practice, 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 learn as much as you can. You want to do the competition because you want to, not because someone's forcing you to do it. You're the one who is actively following to do the presentation, and you're the one who's hungry for knowledge and, wanting to learn as much as you can. So like Lennon said, practice and communicate with the industry professionals because nobody knows it better than them. So practice, 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 practice.
And from my perspective on 2 different points, number one, all of our CTSO competition, competitive event, technical standards, whatever the name is they're aligned with industry, is they're really aligned with what students should know and be able to do. So for the students, I would say, know your competitive event guidelines, technical standards, know them inside and out, really study them. For the educators, is help your young people align with industry. Industry knows what they should be doing in those competitions better than anybody. And that can be making a connection with an industry person, bringing them into your school, connecting your students that are in those competitions with those industry experts, because they are experts in what they do. And that's going to help them obviously in your classroom, that's going to help them in competitions, and ultimately that's going to help them in life. So again, for students and educators, know those competitive event standards, those technical standards. And number 2, align with business and industry, because it's the foundation for what the competitive events are built on.
Excellent. Fantastic advice. And for those of you who are on Twitter, I did start a Twitter profile this year called @CTSO Authority. And every day I post tips for competition readiness. And let me put that in the chat. So feel free to follow that and share those tips and tidbits with your students. And also have your students, if they're on Twitter, follow to get some tips. With that, I also want to say, because we've had so many awesome comments in the chat today. If you're interested in being a guest voice, so sharing out your success stories or anything related to your experiences, with CTSOs in the advisor book. We want to have multiple voices from different CTSOs and from perspectives from across the country. So for both our panelists and for the folks that are sharing out in the chat and attending this webinar, and even if you're attending through the asynchronous version, please reach out to me, Rachel at teachliketed.org, or connect with Megan at ACTE. It's going to be published through ACTE, so she'll be able to put you in touch with me. And Megan, did you have any final thoughts, or did any of our panelists have anything else you want to share before we jump off here today?
Thanks, Rachel. I just wanted to piggyback what everyone's been saying, how wonderfully engaged everyone was on this webinar. You all have been amazing. We hope you will continue your involvement at ACTE. I'll put my email in the chat, and also thank you to our panelists and to you, Rachel. You all did a fabulous job. We really enjoyed today's content and engagement and just all your valuable expertise. So thank you to everyone who joined today, including our panelists and you, Rachel. And we will be posting this to our website, the recorded link. So if anybody asks, we do post them. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you on our next webinar.
Thank you, ACTE.
Thanks, everyone.